Okay, so welcome everyone to this Easy Happy Hour session. For those of you that are new, this is a series of topic session on Easy and surrounding topics that goes on every Monday. That's been going for already a few months now, and there is we are already doing some reruns on some previous session with some improvements, and right now we are in our topic session on different way to gain access to Easy. Today's topic will be yet another way to run easy, and it's about Docker extensions. So a few highlights before starting. Literally today we had the release of a new blog post on the EuroHPC Federation platform and the Easy as the software catalog beneath it. I don't know if Kenneth wants to say anything more about it, but it's
Maybe after you're done talking, then we
okay.
can
Okay, okay.
take a look at this.
Then, as far as meeting goes, we will have the 11 TC build user meeting. It's coming soon. It will be between the 21 and the 23rd of April in Guimarães in Portugal. We will have other webinar series which are going to be in starting from the 27th of April, and I think this will also be a chain of webinars. There are yet another two webinars that are taking place for the European Federation platform, and they will be coming soon. And there is the EESSI conference in Hamburg in June. So this is a small recap of what has been discussed in this topic sessions previously. These are different ways that you can gain access to Easy. Most of them actually under the hood relies on having a SerVMFS client installation. So the recommended way is to have SerVMFS natively installed in your system and mount the file system for Easy. But if you cannot do so, but for example, you can run Singularity or Apptenner container on your system, you can also use the Easy container script. You can use SerVMFS XX to try and mount Easy in the user space if you have access to the fuse and if the client is available on the system, but Easy was not already mounted. You can use Easy Online by pre-downloading everything into a shrink wrap file system and mounting it. And then there is also the command line, Easy command line interface as a tool to more easily gain access to Easy and also the status of your SerVMFS configuration. And in the last session, we've seen one of the possible way to run Easy on macOS, which is through the Lima tool, where we are basically running a virtual machine and a container inside of it, which is SerVMFS enabled. For what I'm going to show you about today is going to be about running Easy in Docker Desktop through Docker extension. One of the reasons why I went this route was because all these ways to gain access to Easy are really nice, and it's in most cases what you should do if you want to get maximum performance or if you're running Easy in HPC environment and so on. But for my purpose, I needed to do a demo for end users that are very non-technical and that have probably never touched a CLI ever. So even giving them access to a VM with this install where they then have to run the code through Easy might have been challenging for some of them to follow. So I decided to go for Docker Desktop, which is basically a third-party tool to Easy, but it is basically mainly developed by the same developer as the Docker Container Runtime and the Docker app, basically. The reason for it is that it gives you access to a very easy-to-use installer. So just by going on the Docker Desktop webpage, you can you can download your installer for either Linux, macOS, or Windows. You just double-click it, follow the normal installing procedure for your system and go. Like on macOS, you have to do the weird swiping into the box to accept. On Windows, you just follow the normal Windows installer procedure, and on Linux, you might have to touch the CLI if you cannot just double click it just to install the package, but this is going to be distro dependent. Then the other nice thing about it is that it gives you a portable experience. Basically, the front end of Docker Desktop is an Electron-based application, so it will look the same on all the operating system. And because of the way the architecture of Docker Desktop is done, it will actually also behave the same on all the systems, so your development workflow will be the same. This is a brief overview of the architecture. Basically, there are two main components to Docker Desktop: a client that is run on your host, and this is what is running your Electron app. And there will be a virtual machine, which is the Docker engine, and this is where the Docker container are actually run into your machine. Where how this work will depend on your operating system, but this is abstracted from you and you don't really need to care unless you're doing really low-level stuff with it. But basically on Windows, it will run a separate WSL instance and run the container on top of it. On macOS, it will run a virtual machine. I'm not sure through which tool because I don't have a Mac to play with. And on Linux, it could run them on the host, but actually in order to have an isolated environment, it runs them into a QEMU emulated virtual machine. So here you can see that basically one of the components on the front end are extensions. What are extensions? They're basically add-ons for Docker Desktop. The nice thing for end user is that they are very easy to install because there is a marketplace that they can browse and they can just search for the extension you want and to click it and install it. So like you would, like if you're installing an application on your phone, so it's something that most users will be familiar with. And what they do, they basically allow for extending the functionalities of Docker Desktop, they allow for extending the UI, or also straight out shipping application through Docker Desktop. So, what exactly are extensions? If you look under the hood, they are basically a fancier way to run Docker containers. The nicer thing is that the user don't need to do any Docker command to do that, to set up networking and so on. Everything is established by the extension itself. How they work, basically, there is the front end of the extension that lives in the same space as the Docker desktop client. This will either extend the functionalities of the Docker CLI. It can also install executable. So this is, might be a security concern if you don't have the source code of the extension, because this executable can also be run on your host system from what is being installed on the extension. And it may or may not have some backend services, which are basically Docker containers that you can use for data persistence or service persistence. This is because the front end is actually killed every time you leave the web page, as we will see. Architecture-wise, you have basically the front end that is living in the same space as the dashboard, as I was saying, and this through the Electron SDK can communicate either through the normal Docker socket that is used to run Docker containers or to an extension-specific socket with to your VM. So without further, I would say, technicalities, I'm going to showcase a little bit of the demo that I use for that I develop using Docker extension. And if you're interested in the source code, they're all available on the iTransfer with GitHub organization. In particular, I'm going to refer to these three repositories, but we will go through the source code a little bit after. So if you have never seen Docker Desktop, or if you run with Docker containers on Windows, you most likely have. This is basically the landing page that you will get after you install it. Okay, you will get some prompt to sign in, but you don't have to do it. And you will basically get a graphical user interface to Docker containers, let's say. So one thing that to make sure if you plan to try this is that if you go on settings and extension, it will not be needed if you're installing from the marketplace, but if you're doing development, you should not have this checked, so you can install extension also manually. And I highly suggest to have the show Docker extension system containers. This is because if you don't have this check mark, all the containers that are being deployed by an extension are actually going to be hidden, not only in this UI, but also if you were to do Docker PS on your command line. So I'm going to actually start from scratch. So I'm going to uninstall this extension and I'm going to go to the marketplace. So this is where you can look for extension. In this case, the one that I developed for the demo is actually still on top because it's fairly decent. And I'm just going to install it. So this will give me access to a new tab here on the left where I can gain access to the extension. Now this is loading, and for those of you that are familiar with the Jupyter server, you will recognize this as the landing page of a Jupyter server with some extra stuff on top. Now before moving forward, just for the sake of the demo and to make stuff bigger, I'm going to actually open this in my browser, which ended up opening, okay, I suppose you can see it right now. And I'm going to pick up the token from the logs here and log in. So this is not just a simple Jupyter Lab instance, but it is actually an easy enable Jupyter Lab instance. How can we see that? There are two extra things that we see. For example, if we open a terminal, We can see here this is the log messages that you normally will see when you run the easy initialization script. This is because the extension, the basher C, it's set up to do this automatically for you when you log in. So we can do, for example, module avail to see that all the modules that are normally available on Easy are here. And we actually can access to this extra tab that will not normally be on a bare Jupyter Lab installation. This is a plugin that is called the Jupyter Helmod. And since we are already running in an Easy enabled environment, this can see all the modules that are available on Easy, and we can actually load them from here. So we can click them to see what you would normally see doing a module show, or you can load them. I'm going to load the easy extend because it's a module that doesn't load too much stuff together with it. This is the message you get after you load the module. And the nice thing about it is that I can, if after I loaded a module in here, I can actually open a new terminal and this will come with the modules already preloaded, for example. The other nice thing is that if I were to start a new Jupyter kernel, now this also will come with the modules preloaded. Just as a small showcase of the code that the European project iTransfer would produce that are now available on Easy. There's plan to have more, but this is, for example, a code to generate microstructure. This is actually running a Jupyter notebook through Voila, so it's actually already loading through Jupyter Realm mode expose functionalities, the module that we need to run this code base, and then it's just rendering some Jupyter widgets for us. This is the first time it takes slightly longer because, as usual, for Easy, we need to download the stuff in the cache, but then we can just run it and it works out of the box. The next thing, this was tested and it works on Windows, macOS, Linux. Right now I'm running on Linux. My demo, I did it on my Windows laptop, and some people were following along with their macOS and everything worked fine. So, yeah, I would say for the showcase of the demo itself, that should be it. I mean, don't know if you're interested in the result itself, but basically once one of these guys finishes, it starts a second generation, but I can actually open another one, so it load the structure that were generated here, and you can see that the structure can be visualized without problems, basically. So, to show a little bit what's the technology behind the extension itself, and now I managed to get this work with Easy. So, as I was saying, there are three main repositories with the source code for this extension. There is this Easy Jupyter Lab Docker, which is basically the Docker container that gives us access to the Easy enabled Jupyter Lab instance. There is the Docker extension, which is a Docker container that is used to spawn other Docker containers, as we will see. That is the main part of the extension, and this is actually what you need to install if you want to install the extension. And then there is the Jupyter Notebooks, that is just what you see here on the landing page of the Jupyter Notebook. So this is basically all the file that you see here when you start the extension. So the container is actually, for the Jupyter Lab, is actually fairly straightforward. It starts from a Debian Slim image. It follows, it basically copies the command you normally do to install Easy on Debian. Then here I'm just installing OpenSSH because I didn't want to deal to having to explain to people that they have to do minus minus PMA, whatever it is. I isolated the 2 run to run on a single node without SSH. Then I'm installing Python, and I'm creating a Python virtual environment in which I'm installing Jupyter Lab and all the plugin I need. Now, one good question you might be thinking already about is why I don't take this stuff from Easy. The answer to that is that I did this originally. There are a few hiccups on that. First of all, it's the combination of extension and plugins I needed for this to work the way it works was difficult to obtain on the 2023 06 software stack. I will need to move to the newer one, but then I will also need to have PyTorch and TensorFlow there, so that was probably not so easy. So I just decided to install them manually inside the extension. Inside the container. Here I'm patching the Jupyter core just to make sure it pick up the same environment variable that Easy build set for Jupyter related stuff. Here we are doing the normal easy installation, so we are copying the easy public key and the servmfs configuration file, and then we are starting the entry point. The only thing that you may see here different than usual is that I'm also pointing the servmfs configuration file cache to a specific direction, and this is so that I can mount a volume here to have persistent of the servmfs cache across when I restart the extension. And the entry point script is basically doing some stuff related to the extension. Here is because I need to know which of the random port I'm exposing is available also inside the extension. So I'm doing some juggling where the extension itself takes the port and write a file inside the container. I'm sure there is a better way to do it, but this was a very last minute thing that I ended up doing. But the main thing is that we are making sure that the cache mount point exists. We are adding some initialization part to the basher C of the user. Here you can see that this is why easy was available when we run the shell. We had this in the basher C, so we are loading. The initialization script of easy. We are doing a module reload. This is because Jupyter Elmod export all the environment variable, but not the bash function. So if you want all the functionalities that you will get when you load the module, you actually need to do a module reload. And then here, this is just because we're picking up the stuff from our virtual environment. And then in this case, we are not using AutoFS, we are directly mounting easy to mount minus TC here VMFS in our system. And then we are running as the user the part that we need to start the Jupyter Lab server. So we are again sourcing easy before, so the Jupyter Lab is easy enabled. Here I'm doing some stuff to pick up those port file that I was talking about, some normal initialization for the MPI stuff that to make sure that we're picking up all the core fabric. And then we're just starting the server, and these are basically give us access to the server that is easy enabled. For how the extension is actually working under on the Docker desktop side, we basically have several components. The main one is this metadata JSON file that tells where the extension should start stuff from. So the logo of the extension that you saw. This VM part tells it actually how to start the backend side of the extension. In this case, I'm saying it should do so from this Docker Compose YAML file, and the socket it should expose to do the communication that I was talking about before, basically this side of the communication with the extension. And this is basically where it should pick up some of its UI from, and we will see it. So basically, the Docker Compose file, it's okay. It's basically starting two containers. One, it's a container that should use this image, which if you look at the documentation, it's a specially image that you have available in Docker that is basically the packaging image for the extension. And then we actually have the meat of our extension, which is the Jupyter container. So we are taking the image from the repo that I just showed you. We are giving it a fixed container name. This is useful because we can then run the Docker command pointing to this container name. And we are mounting the volumes to persist the cache in the home of the user, and we are exposing two ports to random ports. This is to avoid having the extension failing to load if the ports are already used. The main thing is that when you want to run easy in a Docker container, you can, but you have to do so in privilege mode. You might get away with slightly less permission, but it's tricky to achieve. You can do capsys plus some other stuff. Just giving it privilege is the easiest way to mount easy inside of a Docker container, though. And the other component here, I would say, are the Docker file, which is the main container of the extension, which is the one that you can tell it to install if you wanted to install the extension through the command line. This is basically, actually, I'm going to show it from here because I like the visualization more. It has two build sections. One that is building a node application that determines what happens when you click here and what you see here. That is the main driver of the backend, which is the one that is starting the service. And then there is the main container with all these label tags, which are what is generating these pages here, these info pages here when you click on the extension. And then we are copying the Docker Compose, the metadata.json, the stuff that we just built, and then we are starting the main service component pointing it to the socket service. And the other interesting thing is that the main image here is just exposing a ready endpoint to check when the Jupyter Lab is started, and this is being used by the client to basically say, okay, after the extension has started, just what you see here in Docker Desktop, just redirect to the landing page of the Jupyter Lab. And here we are running some Docker command, for example, to do all those juggling with the port file and so on. So don't know if there are more questions or stuff specific to the extension, but I will say this is it for the demo that I had planned. Yes, Kenneth.
Yeah, I have a short question. You showed some places where the easy version being used is hard coded. What would it mean to jump to a newer easy version? Is it essentially updating one container image, one Docker image that you're using, or is it
Yeah, you
spread
will
out?
need to update the container image. One way that you could do it, I didn't have time to explore it for the demo, but basically, this would also be useful if you want to give, for example, GPU access. Here, instead of directly redirecting to the Jupyter Lab page, what one can do is give access to pages where you can select the easy version you want to load, whether you want to use GPU and so on, and this modifies the Docker Compose file inside of it and before starting it. So that would be one way to achieve that.
Some kind of landing page
Yeah,
that you can fill in some things and maybe it gives you pointers to documentation
yeah,
or something. Yeah. Okay. So it is actually possible to avoid the hard coding that you're doing here.
yeah. One thing I didn't say that, and this is something that might still need some work, is that one of the reasons this is working is because the Python version that I'm installing is very close to the one that is being picked up by Easy. Because right now everything in Jupyter is being powered by the Python we are installing in the virtual station, but then we are running code from Python that is coming from Easy. One thing to right now, all the kernel that are started are basically started from the Python. One thing that I didn't look into it is how you can start a different kernel. For example, if you were to load a C++ or an Octave kernel here, but for Python kernel, I haven't seen. I've heard there is a way to start a different one, but I have not looked into it yet.
And what was the reason you're not using the Jupyter coming from Easy? You mentioned it, but
Yeah, partially was because all the plugins that I needed for the extension to behave the way it does, especially the one that gives me access to this stuff, was not working properly with the version I could install on top of 2306. The other minor thing is that in order for all the code to come to Easy, basically you have to preload it before launching Jupyter Lab, which means that when you go into this Jupyter L mode, you basically get all the module for Jupyter Lab already loaded, which might be good or not, depending on if you want to start your shell from a clean environment. I don't know
yeah,
if there is a way around it, an easy way around it.
the downside of that is, of course, that you cannot combine with any modules from the list here, but only the ones
Yeah,
compatible with.
also, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, nice. This is way beyond what we had in mind for Easy, but it's very good to see that it's also working in this very different type of setup. Yeah. I don't know if anyone else has questions.
I don't have a question, but I really liked what you presented. So I also didn't expect it to be so dense, but it's very nice. Yeah.
I guess one other thing that if people are interested in, because one concern, I mean, the fact that the extension is running in a virtual machine, it's less of, it makes the fact that you're running this container where user have access to as privilege less of a concern. But if you're still concerned about it, there are two ways that one could work around it. One is, okay, let me move the sharing teams. I think it's right under it. Yeah. One is to try and make the Docker plugin developed by ServMFS to run, to basically create ServMFS volume inside the extension, so you can just mount it as is. But I'm not sure this is going to work straight out of the box because you still need to create a container inside of it. The other way that I actually managed to get it to work, but it's more finicky for the user, is using bind propagation. You can actually mount create two containers. One that is actually doing the mounting of Easy that is starting privilege, and one where you actually have your Jupyter Lab server and you are this is doing something similar that the ServiMFS CSI is doing in Kubernetes. So you have one privilege container that is doing the mounting. It exposes the mount point to the host to bind the propagation, in this case here, because I'm binding it as a shared, and then you mount it as a read-only slave inside the actual consumer. And then this is something compliance container, because Docker Desktop doesn't allow you to do bind mounts. You have to specify what you want to be able to bind mount through these file sharing resources. But even then, they're not they're not mounted to share propagation enable, so you have to modify it to do so. So in case you're interested in for enhanced security and stuff, this is an extra step. So if there are no more questions, I guess just going to the
Uh,
but
yeah, well, maybe we can quickly take a look at that blog post that was mentioned at the
oh
start.
yeah, sure.
So you had it open.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, we just published this morning, actually. It's just an update on the use of Easy on the different Euro HPC systems, and more specifically in the Euro HPC Federation platform. So there were a bunch of webinars on that in the last couple of weeks. They're all embedded here towards the end of the blog post. So if people haven't seen those, it's worth taking a look, especially the second one, which really focuses on the federated software catalog components of the Federation platform. And also the third one, which talks about the open on demand component, the EFP interactive component, which heavily relies actually on Easy for the interactive applications that are available there. It also includes an overview of the where Easy is currently already available. So today, Easy is available on 7 out of 9 Euro HPC systems, at least the online ones. And we're still working together with Lumi and Jupyter. So Jupyter is not fully production ready yet, but it will be soon. And when it is, it will probably have Easy available out of the box as well. We're still working with the Lumi admins to have a good setup there as well. So yeah, we're in a couple of weeks we'll be on all the Euro HPC systems. Yeah, people should just read the blog post and let us know if they have any questions.
Yeah, so if there are any question or that after the recording, I guess for the recording, the next topic series will be going from x86 to RISC-V and expanding easy reach. So I guess thank you everyone for attending. Maybe we can stop the recording and see if there are questions of the record.
Makes sense.